Hello and welcome to Essentially Explained, the new podcast on economics. Well, we might come up with a different name for that, but for now that's the name we've chosen. Today we're joined by Daniel Marks.
We're joined, or what? Am I just like a guest now? Okay. All right.
Yeah, you are.
Yeah, I'm ready to watch.
Yeah. Yeah, you're not permanent, mate. I'm just using you as a stopgap before we get someone better.
I'm really underneath his floorboards. He's got me tied up.
Yeah.
He brings me up once a week to do this.
Yes. But anyway, moving on to the actual economics of the podcast.
Oh, jeez, I thought this was chemistry. Sorry, I have to go from that one.
Well, let's be honest, both of us would be useless at chemistry because we'll just blow up the lab. In fact, I'm pretty sure I've nearly blown up the lab once or twice.
We've blown up an egg.
Yes. Yes, this is very... Yeah. But anyway, as in our attempts to seem professional, today we'll be covering the UK car industry. More specifically, it's been inspired by a news article posted by the BBC. So I'll just quickly read the title so we both know what's happening. So the main headline is Car Industry Faces Tariffs Over Japanese and Turkish Car Parts. Now, I already know that your views on tariffs, and I think we both agree that tariffs are never a good thing for trade. We both know that the theory behind it. But what are your initial thoughts behind this sort of news?
Well, tariffs for some countries can bring a comparative advantage. However, for the UK, in the car industry particularly, tariffs are awful. Everyone knows that. The trouble is that the UK car industry isn't completely by itself. It isn't, if you like, it relies on a lot of globalization, of course, doesn't it? You have to bring a lot of unfinished goods first that then are translated into an actual car. And the trouble is, if you put tariffs on them goods, suddenly the cost of the car increases, or possibly a company just doesn't see it as viable anymore and they leave.
No, this is completely true. Tariffs are an outdated model of trade. As you mentioned about globalization, sort of related to the article, obviously Nissan, Honda, a number of Japanese car manufacturers have their bases or assembly plants or what have you in the UK. Obviously, in general, tariffs just make things more expensive for consumers, which is obviously not good for consumption, and obviously this is not good for AD and the economy. But I am in complete agreement that the UK car industry does not benefit at all from any sort of tariff. It's just not productive.
Yeah, I mean, taxes and tariffs in general can be useful for some countries, like I say, for a comparative advantage, and also for revenue raising. But I just don't see the need for a tariff. I mean, it's a tariff for goods leaving the EU, of course, isn't it? It's not this isn't going to be something the British charge. This will be a tariff in a goods leaving.
Yeah, which will hurt, obviously, us importing.
British-based firms will have to pay. It doesn't work the other way.
Yeah.
And the problem with that is that a lot of, I mean, it's mostly actually going to affect finished goods. Really, I mean, what essentially the EU are trying to say is you're right next door to us. You're our closest competitor. You're not willing to play by our rules. So why the hell should we go by the same terms? And you can sort of understand why, because the EU have to protect their own interests. It would be silly to allow the UK to compete on a level playing field when they don't play to the rules themselves. But I think this is even more of a political move than it is an economic. At the point of Brexit all them years ago now, seems like.
It only seems like yesterday, actually. Like,
listen to me.
To be fair, I will be in agreement. It's sort of dragged quite a bit. It's been 4 years now since the election?
Yeah, 2016 was the vote, and it's taken a while. But yeah, no, I think at that point the EU looked a bit weak because it didn't expect a believed vote. I don't think I did. I don't think a lot of people didn't actually. They would have predicted a slightly slim Remain vote. But I think the EU now has to appear strong politically. I mean, I don't think it even wants to give preferential rules to the UK because it hasn't done for other countries. You know, countries like, for example, Switzerland, they're not part of the EU, but they have the same trade terms. But because they agree to certain things, like they have to pay into the EU budget and things like that, and freedom of movement, and we would never agree to that for some reason because we have a what's the word of a government?
Yeah.
There's shambles.
Yeah, Omni Shambles.
Omni Shambles, that's a good one.
Yeah, that's the best description. For anyone that does get the reference, which will probably be very few. But yes, returning to the point at hand, I am in agreement that it is a political move by the EU. Obviously, we are competitors now. Obviously, it's a massive disadvantage now of us competing with the EU. The EU
Are we really competitors?
Well, yeah, I was just about to come on to that. I was just about to come on to that, actually, that, well, we don't really compete in terms, obviously, we don't really manufacture anything as such. We're all service-based in terms of what we export to the rest of the world. But obviously, we still assemble some goods like the cars, the Hondas or whatever. So I think we're still going to be damaged. Obviously, to the extent which we'll be harmed is hard to say. I'd have to have another look at the data. There's probably quite a few. Yes.
Yeah. I mean, look, it's not like Britain is a thriving car industry with loads of British companies, you know, factories everywhere, and it's like an integral part of the chain, heavily subsidised. It just isn't like that in the UK. You know, the in general, heavy industry since the days of Thatcher, you know, have plummeted, and cars is one of them. I mean, we have a decent sized car industry in the UK. We've got some prominent, you know, big factories, and the truth is if these tariffs do go through, and you know there are, you know, you would assume that following this line of logic that there's going to be further regulations and customs and, you know, barriers that put the costs up to firms. I don't see big car companies like, you know, the likes of possibly like either Citroen or Peugeot or whoever operate in the UK. I don't see them sticking around for years because I just don't think it's going to be financially possible. What's the point? I mean, their main market is the EU. It's not like these factories are only serving UK customers, because they're not. A lot of it is exported. So what's the point in, you know, exporting from a country with higher barriers when you might as well just do it internally? You know, I think they would save a lot of money, and I can see that happening.
Yeah, you can just have people assemble it in a country where wages might be lower, or as you said, it's going to be cheaper to export and to trade with. Talking of the trade with the UK, because that's quite an interesting point. How do you think the UK is going to deal with its trade? Like, who do you think the UK will trade with in the future? Obviously, there's talks of the UK trading with. Obviously, there's already been a deal with Japan.
Yeah, I was going to say there's been obviously, yes, a free trade agreement with Japan. I imagine it will be along them lines. I mean, the troubling thing with this is that trade deals take years and years to negotiate, and we don't really have years. You know, the transition period ends this year. You know, we don't have long left, and the truth is after that we will literally be subject to WTO third country rules, which essentially means that we are on a very poor playing field, you know, with other countries. So free trade agreements are the most simple and effective type of agreement in a short space of time. You saw that with Japan. You know, it's very simple terms. You know, there are very minimal tariffs, if any, implied and imposed on goods. You know, and it's just simply a case of, you know, goods can move freely like they can in the EU and us right now in the transition period. What I think will happen is something along the lines of other countries. I can see us trading with the likes of Canada, obviously some Commonwealth nations like Australia, New Zealand, and so on and so forth. Obviously, there's a lot of talk with a US trade deal, but that all depends on which old man wins. So, you know.
Yeah, I mean, you talk about the US. I swear that talks about a deal with the US have been going on for years now.
Yes.
It's never materialised. I'm not quite sure what that trade deal would consist of.
So it would be, obviously, in most terms, it's a free trade agreement like all the others, but there were certain clauses and certain things that the UK objected to, and there were also political consequences afterwards. I mean, one of them was that essentially, and in simple terms, that the essentially explained, in very simple terms, the US would have access to, certain goods and certain medicines and things supplied by the NHS at a similar price. And then that was where you got the motion of, from Jeremy Corbyn, that he's selling off our NHS, which it has some truth to it, but it also doesn't. And the truth is that a US trade deal is looking unlikely at the moment because it's not a simple thing. The US is a very large economy. It's the largest in the world. It's larger than the EU, for example. We don't do as much trade with the US as we do with the EU, but a lot of what we do trade has implications. So I think with the political climate at the moment, with Trump, and obviously with the saga about the UK potentially breaking international trade laws, there's been a lot of threats from over in the US side that they simply, if this were to happen, if they were to pass this internal markets bill, they just simply will not negotiate a free trade agreement with us.
Right, I wasn't aware of that. That's quite interesting. I mean, you talked about briefly about the EU. I mean, they are currently our biggest trading partner. I think they will remain our biggest trading partner even post-Brexit. Obviously, the volume of trade might slightly decrease. So I would have to. What is the percentage at the moment? Is it 40%, or is it slightly higher?
I think about 35-40% bull market, sort of around that region. Yeah.
So obviously, it's gonna damage our economy. Obviously, because now we're having to pay tariffs and what have you for importing. But there are opportunities we've talked about, like Australia. Although the Japanese deal I had a look at is pretty insignificant financially. The EU, Japan and UK are for being mega trading relations. I mean, obviously most Japanese imports are things like technology, cars, stuff like that. So there are some good points to it, but it's not the most significant. Our trade with Japan isn't really significant. Not on the same level as someone like the EU or the US. Yes, I mean, I think the ballpark figure I'd look at put it at maybe a 0.2% boost in GDP, maybe even less than that. Well, obviously that is still quite a bit of money, but it's not quite the boost we would like.
No, it's not. It would be detrimental, effect if a deal was to go through. But it's important because the truth is we're negotiating, hundreds of these types of deals as we speak with loads of different countries, and some will be quicker than others, obviously. But the EU is going to be the big stumbling block because, and this is something I learned that it's handled very differently. This was one of the reasons why the Brexit campaign was so successful, unfortunately for us. In that like the EU is obviously a common border, external border, isn't it? It's a trading union, so it's a single market and a customs union. So what happens is individual countries within the European Union can't negotiate their own trade deals normally with other countries. They're negotiated on behalf of that country by the EU. So the problem is we simply can't have access to, even if we were, obviously really we're only prioritising trade from a handful of countries within the European Union. We don't trade on mega terms with all of them. But the truth is we can't go, through each country and negotiate individual trade deals. We have to do it through the European Union's negotiating delegation, which is why we're having the problems we are.
So what I'm gathering from that is you don't think it's a good idea, the EU sort of making negotiations, making deals on our behalf then? I'll be honest, I'll give you an opinion here because I'm going to be controversial. I'm a Remainer. Okay, I think the EU is, a great idea. I think it's contributed to peace in Europe and, greater cooperation, especially in the face of superpowers like China and the United States. The EU needs all the help we can get. But that is one element of it that, even to me, as quite a strong Remainer, was simply wrong. The fact that the individual countries get very little say in the negotiation of trade deals, but also politically as well, in the sense of how it's laid out, without going into too much detail, obviously. Elements of the Commission, which are basically the executive, like the government, if you want to call them that, of the European Commission, are just completely unelected. People haven't even heard of half of them, and
it is concerning, really, and I think that partly contributed to why we're out of the EU now.
Yeah, obviously, I know this is straying a little bit more into politics, but it's still quite interesting. I think.
Yeah, I mean,
I think there definitely is quite a big divide between obviously the EU hierarchy and obviously the people within certain countries, which.
yeah, I mean, I couldn't tell you who my representative, even to the European Parliament, is. I couldn't tell. I mean, obviously, I know who the head of the European Commission is, but the truth is I don't know a lot of what their jobs are, how they impact upon us. I know a bit, but that's only because I have an interest and I've studied this sort of thing. But the common voter won't have most of the time, and so you can see why there was such support for leaving the European Union. I take the view that actually it would have been better to reform it. But reform is very difficult to achieve within the EU, within such a bureaucratic organisation.
Yes, reform would take many, many years, which I don't think some people have the patience for, which is a fair enough viewpoint, I guess. But I think if we had stayed in the EU and we'd been there to reform it, we now can't do anything because we're going to be leaving the EU. Maybe one day the EU will be an organisation that we would want to be part of again.
Absolutely, yeah.
Whether it be for trade benefits or I doubt for freedom of movement benefits, because that seems to be a sticking point.
Yeah, I mean, I'm personally in favour of freedom of movement. I think it's essential with British industries, like things like agriculture and certain elements of the services sector are so heavily reliant on immigration, but there just seems to be such a stigma about immigration in this country that the likes of UKIP or the Brexit Party have fueled on, and ultimately it's brought them votes.
Yes, if not seats, which we're both aware.
Yeah, well, not the UKIP.
Thankfully, yeah.
Well, one, sorry.
Oh, one seat, sorry. Yeah. But yeah, I think we've covered that quite well. I was just having a quick look through the business. They put it as business news on the BBC for some reason, but really they should split it into economics and business news because they're very different topics. So just having a quick look. You have your normal COVID news. So H&M are to close 250 shops as COVID sales online. Yes, it obviously sort of the movement of to online sales has been happening for more like a couple decades, really, in the making.
Yeah.
So this is just the latest in a series of stores and businesses moving their operations online. Obviously, it's more economical to operate online these days. People, obviously with COVID especially, people not.
Yeah, I mean, this is a COVID drive, and this is what I've always said is on the subject of, I guess, online shopping, online in general, is that if you look in over time, there's been the turning points that have massively affected culture everywhere, and I think COVID-19 is going to be the next one. Really, you could probably earmark the Second World War and things like that in the 70s and 9/11 more recently in views of immigration things, and COVID-19 is now that big thing in terms of looking for more digital alternatives. I think that the message is at the moment, don't go to, well, we don't know, don't go to work, do go to work. The message is at the moment, it is, go to work, but if you can do it from home, do it. But I think over time, even without COVID, when it hopefully eventually, disappears or it certainly becomes less prevalent, I think we're going to be looking at people working online from home more often. I think, we could even, I mean, it's actually quite a good point because my theory was that actually if you took away a lot of office space, which would be poor for people's mental health, but on the other side, I guess, you can build lots of homes on it, and this country has a proper housing crisis, and very little land, and a lot of them blocks can be renovated quite easily into apartment buildings and things, and it would really be a different shift in culture as well as economic.
Yeah, there is an argument for that. Obviously, one massive pro is obviously if people are travelling less, this is good for the environment, right? However, you talked about the mental health disadvantages. Also, people will be sort of, especially if people are walking or taking the train to work, if they're working from home, obviously that's not good for their physical health as well. So, which could obviously put a strain on the NHS in a few years. I mean, the NHS is struggling with
Oh,
and obesity.
look at them, that externality
Yeah.
analysis.
Yeah, this is why I'm on the podcast for this
He's
extra
done his A
analysis.
level.
Yeah,
He remembered, but he didn't actually do it. He got grades. He cheated.
I did not cheat on any test. I
He had to
was
produce the teacher.
well. That's my credibility gone down the pan. I might as well just leave now.
I think Wall Street's going to be rocked by that tomorrow.
Yeah. Yeah, just,
Investment banking executive caught in adultery scandal or something.
yeah. Well, let's be honest. That's probably the banking news every other day. To be fair,
Yeah,
whenever,
no, they are. Yeah.
whenever it's not COVID, it's some banker having an affair with the secretary or something. Looking...
Getting back to oh yeah, of course, we're talking about the online revolution,
Yes.
which is the slowest revolution I've ever experienced. I don't know about you.
Well, no, in the grand scheme of things, it's been a very rapid revolution.
Yeah, in the last couple of months in particular, yeah. I mean, the truth is actually that, people have been saying for years, everything's going to be digital one day, you'll be able to do this without even leaving your house. But the truth is, over the last few years, actually, like things like online activity and retail and things have actually been pretty stagnant. They've been growing, but not by a considerable amount. The truth is there's still the vast majority of, the services sector was, of course, in person. But because of COVID, this, has obviously changed, and it's shot up violently in the last, 6 months or so. And I honestly don't see that changing. I think there'll be some fall off, obviously, when lockdown and hopefully COVID is over and the world has a big party and then gets COVID again.
Yeah,
because that's what human beings are like. But when that does happen, I think people will actually start to stay online a lot more, do things more. I mean, as students, I'm sure you're saying you go down to the shops and things, but if you were home and you were working, for example, you had something on, why wouldn't you do an online shop these days? It's just more convenient, and it doesn't really cost much more. It's a few quid for a delivery charge most of the time, and to me that seems more worth it than the effort,
yeah,
of doing a big shop. And that's the way the world's moving.
Yeah, online shopping is beneficial for everyone, the consumer, which you pointed out, obviously for on the business side as well, because it's much easier in terms of inventory management. You don't have to have a physical shop. You can just have warehouses like Amazon does, which is their business model. They're very good at it. Number of other online retailers.
Yeah, even though they were lost for like the first 5 years or whatever it was, wasn't they?
Yes, but they were obviously we're both where they were growing their market. It was
this is the nature of business. You have to speculate to accumulate, I guess is the phrase, and you're going to experience losses. But yeah, from a business point of view, I mean, this was something I was quite shocked about with online shopping. Actually, the profit margins for certain supermarkets are not actually that great. They actually make more money sometimes through in-store purchases than they do deliveries, because there's a lot of the average costs, if you want to go economics now, if we want to imagine that graph, the curve is upward, is higher a lot of the time. So obviously the supernormal profit is less because of things like vehicle maintenance and the low delivery fees. And the truth of it is actually supermarkets may have to charge more or upgrade their infrastructure at the moment, because currently it's not good enough to meet demand in the future to actually make online shopping a truly profitable enterprise over retail in person.
Yeah, the supermarket industry is a weird one, isn't it? Because you obviously have a number of big supermarkets. It's we would describe it as an oligopoly, wouldn't we, in economics?
Yes, supermarkets are an oligopoly, in the UK.
But from oligopoly, it's very, very, very competitive. Obviously, with the emergence of Lidl and Aldi in the last, it's been more than 5 years, but let's say 5 years or so, it's forced these businesses, these supermarkets, to reduce their X inefficiency. In order
to get economics, they won't really have much X inefficiency if you stick to models, because they're oligopolies.
True.
If you follow the models, I mean, they will have some, but it's mostly monopolies that are associated with X inefficiency. The truth of it is that I keep saying that a lot, don't I?
Yeah.
The honest truth is, there you go, that's different. Originality there. Yeah, the honest truth is that I don't see supermarkets going fully online just yet, but I think over time, because COVID's going to be with us for a while, we know that, You know, people talk months as if this is going to be a thing that just disappears one day. You know, vaccine is going to come along and save us all. It's not. It might come along, but it might not work. You know, it might not be as effective. It might only work for a short amount of time. You know, no one knows. And I think we're going to have to adapt as human beings. I mean, it sucks at the moment. I don't know about you, but COVID has ruined everything. And you know, it's not just a social point of view. It's taking people's lives. You know, and I don't see it going away. And so we have to adapt. We can't sit in our rooms forever. And maybe online shopping and more online revolutions are the way forward. That's the way the economy will keep ticking over.
Yeah, I mean, that's an excellent point. Obviously,
thank you, teacher.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, obviously COVID's been terrible, and not, as you said, not only from a social or an economic point, but obviously people have died, and that's very sad, obviously. But if we're sort of talking about the online environment, like just broader speaking, beyond supermarkets, because obviously everyone's aware about the movement online for that. But obviously it's feasible to see, like, even, I don't know, cars or the car industry returning back to that. That could move even more online. Obviously,
I mean, technology is getting better and better, but I think the thing is technology is always seen as a bit of a silver bullet in the sense that it's going to make everything go away. You know, I mean, it solves a lot of problems. It certainly was, 20, 30 years ago, and during the them sort of revolutions and things. But I don't know if you've experienced this, but I've experienced a lot of problems even in the last few days, just the university trying to get lectures or a welcome event or whatever, and you have about 140 people in a Zoom call effectively, and it's awful. And so that's partly a reason why online business will go that way, but it's not there yet. We have to look at ways of improving technology. There are still fundamental issues that make life hard for everyone. I mean, at the moment, I think we all see this as just a phase, and everything's going to go back to normal eventually. But the truth is this might be more than a phase. It might be life. It might be how things go on from now. We might be doing more online learning, or online shopping, or online car washing. However that's going to work in the future.
Yeah.
Maybe that'll work. And that's life.
Online car. Yeah, I mean, obviously there's some services you can inquire about online, but obviously you'd have to sign it off and everything. But yeah, I agree that there's still some way to go technology-wise. I think obviously it's more of a younger generation thing. I think the older generation is getting more used to. Obviously, it's quite useful being able to order shopping online.
You sound like one of my nan's friends who walks dogs in the park. Bloody youngsters.
Well, I'm basically an old man, aren't I?
Yeah, just sitting out, staring out the window.
Feeding the ducks at the park, yeah.
Yeah, with your little coat and that stupid hats that people used to wear them.
Yeah.
Black hat things, yeah.
Yeah. Now I've lost my train of thought. But yeah, essentially, I agree that there's still a way to go, not only in developing the technology, but in educating everybody and giving people the access to that technology.
Equality of opportunity, which is a myth.
What is a myth? Sorry, can you repeat that?
Equality of opportunity. That was essentially what you're referencing there.
Okay, please expand.
Oh, well, we're going politics now. This is going to be interesting.
Well, yeah, but you can insulate it a little bit.
It's entirely relevant. It's an idea that floats around, particularly during like the Blair times, the sort of third wave socialist sort of revolution, I guess. I'm using revolution a lot. Maybe we should call the channel Revolution. Be a good name.
Possibly.
But essentially, the equality of opportunities idea that what it says, what it does. Everyone has equal opportunity to do things in life. It's not it's a case of there's one poor person. This was a way that my teacher explained it. There's one poor person. There's a rich person. If in simple terms, and the idea of equality of opportunity is that the poor person is dragged up to the same level, so that they, for example, state education or the NHS is a concept of equality of opportunity. But the equality of opportunity is a bit of a myth because it's so hard to actually, just because legally or someone has the option to do something, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to take it or it will actually benefit them. And this is the problem with internet access. The truth is, most people these days do have internet access. I think, like 92% of people will have some sort of internet access. I think something along those lines. But there's still deep problems within, the UK's infrastructure. In the internet, for example, some counties and some areas get like 2 megabits per second of speed, if that, less than that sometimes. How are we meant to develop and respond when we're so slow to change what's at heart? Do you know what I mean?
Yes, I completely understand where you're coming from. I think. I think so. I mean, even if you look at the United States as a case study with the medical care system, I know it's slightly different to technology, but it's the same sort of principle of equality of opportunity sort of thing, right? Yeah. I mean, and the premise is there's things like the Affordable Healthcare Act were examples of steps towards equality of opportunity. Yeah, it gave 20 million. What they always said, that it gave 20 million Americans access to health insurance that was quite cheap, and it was state run. And this ties back into the sort of like the digital revolution, because we need to make sure that everyone has the equality of opportunity in a digital age when people could well be sat behind a screen. Some people just simply haven't got that access yet and won't be able to. The internet around my university is okay, but there are times when it just literally dies. And if we don't solve them problems, then it's just not going to work. The countries will become very frustrated. The world will become frustrated. I completely understand that and agree with that point of view. I think obviously you've already mentioned that it could be the new norm even 5 years post COVID. Which will be obviously a huge change for the world, economy. I mean, before global, the first parts of globalization were obviously, where, I don't know, British or other European countries were traveling the world and trading goods or doing other things that were slightly less legal in view of international law. But yes, the sort of COVID revolution as such could have a massive impact on the way we trade in our financial systems. A lot of more banking services are now online. All my banking's online. I set up a bank account before I came to university completely online. Didn't have to see anyone, just put a picture of my driving license in, easy. You rarely have to go into a bank anymore, which is probably why so many branches will be closing.
Obviously, that there's the effects of unemployment. If we're going back to a purely economic viewpoint, but this is how life is going to be. The economy has to move on. The people have to move on. And online banking is an example. But there are some. I know it sounds all doom and gloom, but there are some benefits. Things are now. Everything is much more uniform, if you like. Is everywhere. There's information, you can access it quite easily. And the lines of the risk of sort of blurred lines or miscommunication are slimmer now that everything's online. Everyone can see it. But I think the problem is the internet is so crowded full of stuff that it's going to be tricky moving over. And go back to the economic viewpoint again. If you go to online shopping, online car washing again? That was what I was saying, wasn't it? It's going to create more jobs in other areas. Then there's always this viewpoint that the online revolution is going to take away jobs from people because it takes away shops, so they lose their jobs, and it's the end of that, and it's all doom and gloom. But it creates jobs for everyone. It takes away, and Deliveroo, for example, are hiring. I can't remember exactly how much. It was several thousand new delivery drivers in the UK, and that's a great thing. I mean, it's a different sort of work. It's not the traditional 9 to 5, 38 hours a week sort of thing. It's 38, isn't it? But it creates some jobs for particularly like students, for example. The gig economy, as you call it, and people have to look at it from two different viewpoints. Their job's taken away, but there's also a job given.
I mean, I'm going to pick up on that point because even though I agree, obviously it does create jobs. It creates jobs for different people. So the people losing their jobs, let's take the You know, the Thatcher era, for example, the coal miners and all that. Obviously, they didn't have the transitional skills once they lost their jobs to be able to move into the newly created jobs, more service-based jobs that were created. So with this, taking that as a case study and transitioning it to the modern era, if you're having people lose their jobs, they might be unable to adapt to the new online environment. So you might be creating new jobs, but not for those people that have lost it, if that makes sense.
Yes, you will get long-term structural unemployment. We're going purely economics now. A-level students will love this.
Yes.
You will have pure structural unemployment. And you know, for an area we lived in before we moved to university was Medway in Kent. And, you know, that was 100 years ago or so, during the days of the British Empire. You know, that the dockyards there, Chatham dockyards, were such a key part of the local economy. You know, employed thousands of people. They built ships on this gargantuan scale, and now that's closed. It has led to some levels of structural unemployment, which you can see in the sort of levels of inequality relative to other areas around that area. And it's the same on a national or even an international level. There will be people at the moment who specialise in certain jobs that were so fundamental in a pre-COVID sort of environment, I guess, that will have suddenly been furloughed or made redundant and may not get their job back again. And they're at the point where they're too old, or they don't understand their new job, so it's very hard to retrain, and that will cause, you know, structural unemployment, but also intergenerational,
yeah,
unemployment. You know, and there you go, another key term. Write that one down.
Yep.
You know, and unemployment, and that's going to cause issues for decades to come for some families. You know, unfortunately, and they're unlucky enough to be caught up in that situation. And unemployment is really, I think, one of the biggest risks with COVID and internet access.
Yes, I mean, even if you look at the unemployment statistics, like even pre-COVID, obviously, what was it? Unemployment was around the 4% mark, I think.
Yeah, NRU. There we go, another one.
Yes, the NIRU.
Or the NIRU.
Yeah.
The natural accelerating inflation rate of unemployment. So.
Non-accelerating. Yes.
The NIRU. We'll just call it that. Trust me, it'll be fine.
Yeah, it'll be
non-accelerating rate. Sorry. Yes. And yeah, you're right. It was about 4%.
Yeah, but essentially that doesn't tell the full picture, because if you look at certain regions, especially in the northeast, in the old industrial areas, unemployment will be much higher. Youth unemployment, you brought up actually creating jobs for young people, and this is I guess the counter argument against my previous point about taking jobs from the old people, is that it does help with youth unemployment, which is a problem the UK has suffered from for various reasons.
Lots of European and every country suffers with, to a certain extent. Spain is another European country with very high rates of youth unemployment. Other countries like Brazil, very high rates of youth unemployment. Even the US to a certain extent. And yeah, I mean, but yeah, you're right. There is this argument that even though a COVID world should create more jobs for certain industries, like, you know, the gig economy, like takeaways and restaurants and things that can be done quite easily, and particularly jobs that require more flexibility but lesser hours. Yeah, they do create jobs for young people, but there is still real structural issues in youth unemployment. I think that's partly because of a lack of skills, a lack of access to quality education, but also I think simply because to flip that sort of argument on its head, really access to education has created some of them problems. Because I know it sounds silly, but the truth of it is that everyone goes to university these days. Well, not everyone, but the majority of people, you know, over 50%, 52%, I think it was, I saw somewhere, of students go to university these days after they, you know, leave school in some way. And what that means is everyone's on a level playing field. Everyone has a degree now, so the sudden benefits are not as great, and so you have hundreds of people applying for one position, and then, you know, that leads to underemployment. Another good term. Write that one down. Yeah. You know, and popping out the terms today.
Yeah, you're on the roll.
Yeah, and philosophers, right? Yes, and the main problem with that is then, yeah, you have youth unemployment if they aren't employed, or underemployment, which is, you know, the dark horse, if you like, of unemployment. It's the one that's not really talked about. Yeah, there is that argument, but I guess to counter that, if you like, um, youth unemployment is a very tricky thing to measure because it's defined by lots of different things. You have a lot of people classed as unemployed, another labour force. There you go, there's another one. Labour force is another big one.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of people classed unemployed will be students, for example. Some students are technically part of the labour force still because some of them are actively seeking work, another key category. And yeah, there will be, of course, an instance of unemployment, but you have to consider someone will be in education, so they won't want employment. Some will still be living from home, so you know, they might not know what to do themselves. And I think that's the problem with a lot of young people these days. They just simply do not know what they want to do, and if they do, they very rarely get the chance to do it.
Yes, I mean, these days you have to be certain the degree you want to do is what you want to do in the future. I mean, the utility you get from a university degree, as you were saying, is far less than even 20 years ago. Because obviously,
that's a good idea. We should do that as a video. The utility, the economic.
We should actually. I think I'm doing utility mathematization in my degree at the moment. I think it's one of the topics we're covering in contemporary economics.
Yeah, I mean, maybe it'll make us rethink our choices.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, but yeah, it's a very valid point.
Yeah, I mean, you need other things besides a university degree, which is, you know, what might be turning people off. They might be like, we don't need a university degree for this. We could pursue alternative routes. Going to university is very expensive, sort of, technically. Obviously, you don't always have to repay the full amount, but the lump sum is quite off-putting. I think...
Yeah, I mean, yeah, we should definitely do a video on this.
Yeah, we should actually. It is a very interesting topic. But I think, yeah, there needs to be more done, maybe more lower down in the education pyramid, maybe even at secondary education. There needs to be more job skills or life skills taught, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
At the moment, I feel that I know this is going more into a social issue rather than an economic issue, but it's all about reducing
our economic issues.
Yeah. I mean, economics is a social science for a reason. But yeah, I think education is good at preparing for people for university, but not necessarily life, and that's where I think young people are struggling to get jobs, essentially.
Well, there you go, everyone. The next Secretary of State for the Department of Education, Martin May.
I would be terrible at politics, so I could never do it.
Oh, for education. Well, you couldn't be much worse than the current Secretary of State for Education, Mr. Gavin Williamson.
Yes, I'm sure.
Was the man who destroyed our lives. No.
Yeah.
But, yeah, you know, interesting time, I guess, really, weren't they? A-levels and results for exams, GCSEs, you know, BTECs, all the rest of it.
Yeah.
I'm sure that.
Yeah, I'm sure all of our, well, probably 0 viewers, maybe 2 or 3 that have randomly or accidentally clicked on this video. Yeah, they obviously have probably got a shotgun pumped ready to fire at the.
I have a dartboard with his face on it.
Sorry?
I have a dartboard with his face on it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty good, to be fair. Don't blame you.
Yes, anyway.
Yes, moving back to economics and not attempted murder of the Education Secretary.
That'll be another video later on.
Yes, no, that'll be after the court case. It'll be a prison special.
After the court case, oh God.
So, yeah, I'm just having one last look at the news before we wrap up for today. I think we've done quite a bit of content in, 40-so minutes.
Not much
Yeah, it's only an introductory one. I'm sure we'll get more technical as the weeks progress. Anyone, or you know, obviously as we progress through our courses. Obviously, you're doing the PPE course, so it's slightly different content to what I'm covering. But we could
always...
Yeah,
I'm fake.
Fake economist. Yeah, but yes, in the news. So this is a rather controversial one.
Ooh, we like them.
Yes. So there's actually quite a couple here, but I think I'm gonna go for this one. Uh, Kit Kat petition delivered to Nestle
I saw
opposing.
that.
Yeah. What do you make of that article?
I mean, it seems such a well. It's not petty, it's a serious matter, but it does seem like a slightly bizarre turn of events, I guess. But it's this link with fair trade, of course, and the trouble with fair trade is it's lost traction in recent years. Fair trade. I remember 10, 15 years ago, well, maybe not that long ago, but certainly 10 maybe. You would go into a shop and you'd see chocolate bars over labelled with free trade, or you'd see potatoes or carrots, fair trade, and you still have it sometimes now.
Yeah.
But it's not as big of it's not a concern. I don't know. Western countries don't seem to see it as a big concern these days. With the domestic issues they're suffering, and it's a shame. Fair trade is a genuinely good thing, and it does help lives. And the great thing is it's outside of the sphere of government. I think if companies start, I mean, that could be possibly a spike that could trigger a wave of possibly the end of fair trade, maybe even actually. Yeah, there are lives at stake with this one, and I think if firms suddenly move away from fair trade, you're going to see possibly a replacement, maybe. But obviously, the obvious consequences of that are pretty stark. I'm sure Martin will take you through them.
Yes. Obviously, Nestle is moving to just having a read of to the Rainforest Alliance certified farmers. But yes, essentially, what removing fair trade or moving away from fair trade does to farmers at ground level is obviously, I don't know the specific figures for how much money they get for fair trade. I'd have to have a look, but it's still an addition to their base income, right? It helps with their income, which is not only good from a business point of view, but is useful for their standards of living. It allows them to access, better goods, better services, which is obviously good for the rest of the economy. If you have more people with more money, if a farmer can buy a TV, for example. Obviously, I don't think you get that much from fair trade, but I'm just talking about if you have more people with more money in general, including farmers, spending money. This is good for the circular flow of income, finance within the economy. More people spending means more businesses get more money, which means they can hire more staff or invest.
Circular flow of income, in my opinion, the most fundamental concept of economics. If you're going to start to study it, if you want, certainly macroeconomics, definitely. I mean, maybe not the whole study. It's a social science. In my opinion, that's like behavioural things. But circular flow of income definitely is one of the key parts that determines absolutely everything.
Yeah, so for anyone that I don't know might be new to economics, is not sure about the circular flow of income, essentially, which it's probably good that I'm using that word, good brand advertising. But yes, essentially, what you have in circular flow of income within the economy is, let's say you have a household. I know it's not as simple as this in real terms, but the base model, you have a household. Within that household, obviously, you will have people earning money, which they can spend at the shops. Their disposable income I'm talking about. Obviously, they have to spend income on bills and what have you.
Well, yeah, unless they're Donald Trump, then yeah, they're earning.
Yeah, that's probably best.
That's paying tax off.
Yeah, probably best that we don't venture down that path. Well, not in this podcast anyway. We'll save that for another one.
No.
I'm sure that'll be quite interesting. The talk about tax avoidance and evasion, which is quite interesting.
He didn't pay anything.
Well, he paid, what was it? How much did he pay? Like $500?
No, we're going on a tangent. Go back.
I know, yes, sorry. Sorry, viewers, as James May would say.
Viewers, listening.
Yes, or listeners even. Eventually, well, this is going to be posted on YouTube, but at the moment we haven't got any background. That needs to be sorted. However, so that household will spend money. Some of that money obviously is paid in taxes to the government, which I'll come back to later. But the money that's spent in businesses, obviously businesses get that money. They pay their bills and what have you, but they also have some money left over. So if they want to expand, they can hire more people. They can invest in opening new stores or expanding or diversifying into new markets, whether that be domestically or internationally. Obviously, turning back to the idea of the government, all those taxes going towards the government can use that money to spend on social services, whether it be healthcare or education. Beyond that, obviously that money goes back towards those households in a way, because those households benefit from that money being invested into those services. Also, if you think about households spending on foreign goods, so within the circular flow of income, you also have injections and leakages. So a leakage would be, for example, a business or a consumer essentially buying a foreign product. So the money's leaving your domestic system and is going to a foreign market, essentially. So obviously, because the money's leaving the system, that's why it's called a leakage. Now, an injection into the circular flow of income could be a foreign business coming over here because they're diversifying from their domestic markets, and they could be building a new warehouse over here, or setting up a shop or what have you. They obviously will invest in their own infrastructure around where they've built that business location, and obviously that's good for the economy, because that means there will be hiring more people who can then pay more taxes and pay more for domestic goods. So essentially all the money sort of flows around in a circular motion, essentially. But yes, beyond that, other injections you might have beyond businesses might be, you might get obviously investment from governments. So the government will, as I've already pointed out, will invest in social services and what have you. Now, Dan, do you have anything to add to that?
No, I agree.
You agree? That was smooth, wasn't it?
Sometimes you need that.
Yeah, just leaving.
You're writing an economics essay.
Yeah,
just get it out and done with.
Yeah, just leave me alone to explain the circular flow of income.
Huh?
But yes, no, I probably haven't done the best job of explaining that. Dan could probably do it in a far more concise way than what I've just done.
There's money. Households get money from wages. They use them wages to then pay for goods and services to a firm. Firms and government, firms and households actually pay taxes to the government, and in turn they receive businesses and services and things like that. And then from outside of that, you have imports, exports. Done.
Okay, you did that in about 2 sentences. I probably spent the last 5 minutes trying to explain that.
There's more to it, but that's the simple way.
Yeah, that's the way to do it in your exams. Don't do what I do and spend 10 years.
Right, no, you need a bit more.
Yeah.
You need a bit more.
Yeah. But yes, that is a very basic, well, not basic in the real world, but at an economic model level.
So definitely not the real world.
No, yeah, because no model in economics is 100% applicable to the real world. We all know this.
At all.
Well, the basic concept of, I don't know, well, what graph should we try and apply to the real world?
I think we've had enough for one day.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll probably save that for another podcast, because otherwise we could be sitting here all day arguing about neoclassical and Keynesian models and what have you. Yeah. But yes, I think we have covered everything.
Sorry, pragmatic.
Sorry?
Pragmatic, sorry.
Pragmatic. Yeah. But yes, I think that's everything we wanted to cover today. Unless there's something you want to add, Dan?
Goodbye.
Well, that was smooth. Yes, so we'll be back hopefully sometime next week with another podcast. We'll try and...
They're really listening, like, oh, I can't wait.
Yeah, they probably listened to the first 5 minutes and clicked off by this point. I don't blame them. But yes, no, we'll be covering something that's more technical next week. This week's been more of an introduction to us two.
Yeah. If Martin May's circular flow of income explanation hasn't killed you, we'll see you next week.
Yes. Goodbye for now.